تو ہم بات کر سکتے ہیں. ٹو وے ہونا چاہیے. پہلے تو بہت شکریہ یہاں آنے کا. میں خود 15 سال کراچی یونیورسٹی میں پڑھاتا رہا ہوں اور باہر بھی کچھ ایک دو اور یونیورسٹیز میں بھی پڑھایا ہے. تو یونیورسٹی میں آ کے بہت لگتا اپنے گھر آ گئے. پہلے جہاں ابھی میں نے فائٹ میں بہت نہیں میں فائٹ کی لائبریری میں نے بہت زیادہ یوز کی ہے. ایون فور مائی پی ایچ ڈی لاٹ آف اولڈ ڈیٹا, پرانا ڈیٹا جو 50s کا مجھے چاہیے تھا وہ وہاں سے ملا. تو یونیورسٹی ہیز contributed to my own development. How much time do we have?
1 hour for discussion and then 1 hour for question.
Okay. I'll follow a sort of a approach by sort of looking at history. The struggle for Pakistan. As you all know, it did not start with the struggle for Pakistan. It started with the struggle for rights within an independent, united India. Even as late as 1946, Quaid-e-Azam was willing to accept United India. Ek three-zone federation was discussed. Zone A, Zone B and Zone C. Zone A would be what is India today largely. Zone B would be what is Pakistan today with all of Punjab. And Zone C would be what Bangladesh is today, all of Bengal and Assam. Muslim League accepted this. It is Congress which did not accept it and then paved the way for Pakistan. This is part of history which is not generally mentioned in the media and elsewhere, but I'm sure if you've read history, you know this already. So the struggle for Pakistan was a struggle for federal rights. It is the federation, the concept of federation was built. The seeds of Pakistan contained it. Then came the Pakistan Resolution, which of course came much earlier than 40. If you read the Pakistan Constitution, it talks about autonomy and sovereignty of constituent units. One can start by saying that the very concept of Pakistan was rooted in the idea of federalism. That's where we started. But immediately after the formation of the country, federalism was discarded. And why did it happen? How? I think what happened is, and these are my views, I have not done any formal research in this area, but I have an interest in history, I've read a bit. I've been part of a lot of political processes in the last 30-35 years. When Pakistan came into being, the ruling elite, whether it is the politicians or civil servants, businessmen, industrialists, professionals, were all migrants from India who today we call Mahajir. Now there was a strange problem. The ruling elite was Mahajir, but they constituted about 8% of the population, and they had no territory to call their province. So they of course had very little interest in allowing autonomy to provinces, because if autonomy to provinces was to be given, where would this Mahajir elite go? They had nowhere to go. And my view is that it is this Mahajir elite, by the way I happen to be a Mahajir, this Mahajir elite also had no interest in democracy. Because in a democracy, in a parliament, they would have maybe 8% seats, 10% seats. But they would not be the majority. They would not control government. And of course, they controlled government and they had no intention of giving it up. So my view is that it was this class that sabotaged all early efforts to form a constitution, all early efforts to hold elections. And as you know, after 47, the constitution was finally drawn up in 56, and elections were scheduled. But in the meantime, in this decade, first decade, what was happening was that as Mahajir bureaucrats were retiring, they were being replaced by Punjabi bureaucrats. So the balance of power began to shift. And in any case, Punjabis were the majority group, and they also had a fair amount of skilled personnel in many areas. They are some of the biggest landlords, very powerful landlords who were part of the Unionist Party and joined the Muslim League later. They were very powerful, and the army was Punjabi. So the focus of the locus of power began to shift away from the Mahajirs, and by 1958 the army took power, shifted the capital to Islamabad, and there was a formal shift of the power base. But it so happened that the idea, the concept that the Mahajir elite had presented of Islam as the foundation of Pakistan has nothing to do with Islam actually, it was self-interest. Now if I am a Mahajir and there are Sindhis and Balochis and Punjabis and Pakhtuns, and I am just 8-10% of them, how do I retain my superiority in this group? So I say, there is no Punjabi, no Sindhi, no Mahajir, no Balochi, we are all Muslims. This country was made for Islam. So you equalize everything. And in that equalized platform, I have a place. And I have a controlling space in that area. So the initial identification of Pakistan with Islam, in my view, was because Mahajirs needed Islam to retain their control. And of course, federalism had no space. It had to be a centralized state. Because federalism would mean power would ebb away from Mahajir hands. It would be dispersed. And Mahajirs, since they didn't have a territory, they didn't have a province, they wouldn't find any place anywhere. But this paradigm that was created, the Punjabi elite also found it very convenient. Because if the Punjabi elite was to control the resources of the other provinces, then of course Islam and centralization was very handy, and it was promoted. And in fact, सबसे ज़्यादा promote ज़ियाउल हक ने किया. The military general and the army, the entire army apparatus used Islam to the maximum. So I think that's the background in which Pakistan, I would say, the spirit of Pakistan was based on federalism. But immediately after the formation of the country, whoever was the ruling elite, whether it was the Mahajirs or Punjabi elite, they found it convenient to put federalism on the shelf and use Islam and a centralized state as a basis for running the country, and it did it for till 1971 when the country finally broke. Because it was as far as you could take centralization and control provinces. The repression of all those elements who were for federalism, rights of provinces, was severe. The repression was severe. People in 1955, the western provinces were abolished and merged under one unit. Again, the same concept. No separate identities. One Pakistan, one Islam, and that's about it. And this trust did not come from the Mahajirs. This trust for one unit came from Punjab. Lahore became the capital. Ayub Khurro was Chief Minister of Sindh. He and the Assembly opposed one unit. And he was dismissed. Sindh Assembly was dissolved. Wali Khan was named and he remained in jail for several years. So was Oswald Vizenjo and many others. Oswald Vizenjo was sentenced to 14 years imprisonment for criticizing one unit. Merely criticizing one unit. That was the level of repression that was there in order to maintain centralized control over the country in the name of Islam. 1972, after the country broke, I think some sense was drilled into our heads. We finally formed a constitution which was unanimously approved by all the parties. One unit was broken, provinces were restored, and there was at least some respect to regional identities, but it was a bit short-lived, not entirely reversed, but the governments of what was then NWFP and Balochistan were dismissed. And Wali Khan again and the whole NAP leadership was arrested and imprisoned. There was a conspiracy case against them. We were all involved in Hyderabad jail. And a military operation was started in Balochistan. So there was some progress with the constitution, the recognition of the provinces, provincial rights, but there were some reversals also in this respect. 77 came martial law, and of course the constitution was suspended. But martial law means centralized state, because the deputy chief martial law administrators of the provinces are appointed by the chief martial law administrator. There is no provincial input into policy making at all. Everything is centralized. So during both periods, it happened during the Ayub Khan's period also, Zia and Musharraf, Pakistan was a centralized state. Both times constitutions were suspended, and of course federalism was not at all mentioned. 88, something very interesting happened. There was an election. Elected government came into power, People's Party at the center. 88 we saw Punjab revolting against the federation. This is now all public knowledge. People have admitted these in court. General Aslam Beg, who was Chief of Army Staff, and General Durrani, who was ISI Chief, they have all admitted in court to having created IJI, funded it in order to stop the People's Party from winning the elections. They failed to stop it. But they managed to form the government in Punjab. Nawaz Sharif was Chief Minister. And this was the Ziaist elements who simply thought that we cannot allow anybody else to govern. And in fact, Hamid Gul, in an interview in Herald, which was published, he said that we are the guardians of national interest and we will not allow anyone to interfere with national interest, and if we have to topple Benazir Bhutto's government, we'll do it. This is a written document in Herald that was published. Nawaz Sharif's government created enormous hurdles for the federal government, to the extent that instituted cases against a lot of People's Party ministers and others, and since Islamabad airport is in Rawalpindi, they couldn't come to Islamabad because they would be arrested in Rawalpindi. So they would land in Peshawar, where there was a People's Party government, and come by helicopter to Islamabad. The Punjab Bank was the first provincial bank to be formed, and it was meant to enable the Punjab government to act independently of the federation, of the central government. It is usually the minorities, those who feel oppressed, who fight against the federation. In 1988, we have the majority province, a privileged province, with almost 80% of the bureaucracy and 90% of the army officer corps revolting against the federation. So this was a bit unique. 2008, again, we had elections. It was by and large, in a sense, a national government, because the policy of the People's Party was to bring everybody on board. So although in Sindh, for example, the People's Party did not need any coalition partner, they brought FKM on board. In the centre also, all parties which were willing to join the government were asked to join the government, and some of them, many of them did, except I think PMLN, almost everybody was in the government, except other than the religious party, whom the People's Party did not want. Two very significant achievements of the period 2008-2013. The most significant was the 18th Amendment. I don't think we have yet realized the significance of 18th Amendment so far. It is perhaps more important than the founding of the Constitution in 73. Because the 18th Amendment has changed the structure and the character of the state. It has dismantled the centralized state formally by Constitution, not just by statements or a law here and a law there. The Constitution has dismantled the centralized state. Establishing dictatorships is going to be difficult from now because of the 18th Amendment. Because the central government simply does not have certain powers. And even under martial law, they will not be able to arrogate those powers to themselves. Not anymore. And the second one was the NFC. I was a member of the 7th NFC, and we had complete support from the central government. I will come to NFC later when I am discussing it, but I think the 18th Amendment gave political autonomy to the provinces, and the 7th NFC gave fiscal autonomy to the provinces. Political autonomy can be of no use if you don't have financial powers and fiscal powers. So these two things were given both in 2010, although the NFC award came first and the 18th Amendment came a bit later. But while we were discussing the NFC, we knew exactly what was going on in the Constitution Commission, because Haji Adil, who was the representative of Pakhtunkhwa on NFC, was also a member of the Constitution Committee, and we constantly we knew what was going on there, so we were committing it. There are two views on the 18th Amendment today. The centralists feel that, and I have heard them say this, that the 18th Amendment is another 16 December 1971. It breaks up the country. It destroys this country. And of course there are efforts being made all the time to reverse it. Education Ministry has been renamed, Human Resource Ministry, Health Ministry has been renamed, probably Food Security Ministry. So nothing has changed, only names have changed. So there is that view. But the other view is that, to which I personally subscribe, is that it has strengthened the federation. Pakhtunkhwa, which was called Northwest Frontier Province, agitated for a change of its name since day one, and they were not allowed. Sindhis could call their province Sindh, Punjabis could call their province Punjab, Baluchis could call their province Balochistan, but the Pakhtuns couldn't call their province Pakhtun. The change of name to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is of immense emotional importance to the Pakhtuns. If there are Pakhtuns sitting here, correct me if I am wrong. I think it's something that they really fought for all the time, and they were rebuffed, and this gave them a lot of feeling that, okay, Pakistan can at least acknowledge our identity. Sindh nationalists, whether it's Qadir Maksi or Balejo or others, they have built their entire political career over half a century on anti-Punjab slogans. I have just returned from to Pakistan after my studies, and I went to Lahore for an HRCP conference on something, and there was one Sindhi nationalist leader. He was making a speech. He said, "मैं अपने हाथ से मशीन गन चलाऊंगा, 50,000 पंजाबियों को मारूंगा." I said, what kind of a language is this? What kind of political campaign is this? And when we finished the NFC, these very people began a campaign that we had sold out Sindh. The finance minister of Sindh at that time was the chief minister himself. So chief minister and myself, we were members of the commission. So there was a campaign that we have sold out. We beat diya Sindh ko. So chief minister asked me to go and campaign. So I addressed 2 public meetings, 3 press conferences all over Sindh, Sakhar and Nawab Shah and Hyderabad. I was accompanied by Shazia Mari, who was an information minister of Sindh. And we began to explain this. And they couldn't respond to us, to our comments. In fact, one seminar which somebody else had organized, Mr. Balejo was also there. He actually walked out after my speech without saying a word. Sentiment. In 2013, all these people aligned themselves with the MLN. This was a huge reversal. Why? Because separatist politics in Sindh is dead. Thanks to the 18th Amendment and thanks to NFC. So, I would submit that the 18th Amendment and NFC has strengthened the federation. We have a problem in Balochistan right now, but I think if the Islamabad and Rawalpindi handle it well, that problem is solvable. And there is evidence that it is solvable. We have a chief minister in Balochistan today who comes from what they call the nationalist parties of Balochistan. And he's not a Sardar. He is not a representative of the establishment, which all Balochistan chief ministers have been. But local body elections have been held only in Balochistan. These insurgents who have been blowing up gas lines and power lines and shooting people, like dragging them out of buses and so on and so forth, they did not kill a single candidate and no polling booth was bombed. Basically what's happened is that the chief minister and his people around him, they've been talking to the insurgents. I know chief minister publicly keep denying that I talk to them, but this is between us privately. This is not a public place. I hope there's no journalist here who will report this, because the chief minister will catch me. The argument they are presenting is that, look here, through the democratic process, we have managed to get the 18th Amendment. And the most important clause for Balochistan in the 18th Amendment, 2 things. One, the abolition of the concurrent list, and the second is Article 172(3), Clause 3. Clause 3 makes oil and gas a joint subject. Previously it was a federal subject. So now Balochistan has joint ownership and control over oil and gas with the federation. This is of huge importance to the Baloch. Control over resources. That's what all their battle is about. All the insurgencies is all about control of resources. And now, at least constitutionally, the resources are in Balochistan's hands. Other than oil and gas was always a provincial subject. So that was not a dispute, although it was managed by the center. But now the province is gradually taking it over. It's all up to the province's own capacity to how fast and how well they can take over these functions. They agree. It appears, the fact that they allowed the local government elections to take place without any disruption, is they have begun to listen to this argument that let's give democracy a chance. And it's important. If democracy is derailed, these people will tell Malik, Dr. Malik, we told you so. You were chasing wild goose. These people in Islamabad will never learn. That's the response they will have. And the situation in Balochistan will certainly deteriorate. But I think we are on a positive path, even in Balochistan. And thanks to the 18th Amendment and the NFC, I think we can create a strong federation, a strong state, and build our economy. Now let me come to NFC. NFC, we had one criteria population by which federal revenues were distributed. The Sindh had a problem. They said 70% of revenue is collected in Sindh, and we get only 23% because that's the share of our population. So there is a resource transfer taking place from Sindh to other provinces, particularly Punjab. Balochistan had a problem. They said we are 44% of the territory. The cost of maintaining this large area, building roads, maintaining roads, is very large, but because we are 5% of the population, we get only 5% of money, which is not enough to maintain the state, not even enough to pay salaries. And for 19 years, an agreement on NFC could not take place because of one reason or the other. But this time, we had an agreement. It was a historic day when finally we managed. So, and I just want to spend some time on the process that we followed. What was happening was, I was appointed on the NFC as Sindh representative somewhere in July 2009, and immediately started working on it. I had done some previous work because my own research on public finance meant I knew the basic figures and everything. But when I started the discussions with people who had been involved with NFC before and with government officials, and I found that there was a very basic flaw in the whole approach. There are two distributions in NFC. One is the vertical distribution, the other is the horizontal distribution. Vertical distribution is what is the share between the center and the provinces. Then the share of the provinces is further divided between the provinces. So the second one is the horizontal, the first one is the vertical. So there are 5 parties to this sharing, the center and 4 provinces. What was happening was that all the 4 provinces would get together, join hands and ask the center for more share for the provinces. And once that would be given, then Punjab would lose interest in any further discussion. Because out of every rupee, extra rupee gotten out of the center, Punjab would get 57 paisas. And any discussion on horizontal distribution means its share would go down. So it had no interest to negotiate further. So it stalled. It said, let's do a study of other countries, where are the best practices. That study took 2 years to do. Then it came, and it became controversial. They interpreted it differently. They said, okay, let's form a committee to interpret it. The committee took another year to do it. And it went on and on and on. 19 saal ho gaye. What we did this time, we said, first, the agreement on horizontal distribution will take place, and then we will discuss vertical. If there is no agreement on horizontal discussion, there will be no agreement on vertical distribution also. So, jo paise mil rahe wohi milte rahe. Now that, of course, put Punjab in a corner. I was representing Sindh. I was promoting Sindh's interest. That was my mandate. But you know, when you negotiate, you never put your opponent in a corner and try and defeat him or her completely. Because nobody is permanently defeated. If you defeat that person today, he or she will come back tomorrow and challenge you. This is something that our politicians, most politicians don't learn. They think that I have defeated him and that's the end of it. But this doesn't happen in real life. So what we did was that we proposed that first the agreement on horizontal distribution would take place, and whatever change you make to the single criteria distribution, Punjab would lose, and other three provinces would gain. Then we said that the vertical distribution then should compensate Punjab, so that Punjab doesn't lose. You know, going out of NFC, saying we won and we took this money out of Punjab and Punjab is now less, would not serve any purpose. After all, there are as many poor people in Punjab as there are in other provinces. In fact, my studies on poverty, in poverty there are 2 or 3 criteria. One is the population below the poverty line, and the other is measure of how far below the poverty line, the intensity of poverty. And you know, in urban poverty in Pakistan, the highest intensity of poverty is in Lahore. Highest intensity of poverty is in Lahore. You have extensive poverty elsewhere. Most poorest is Balochistan, then it's Sindh if you take out Karachi. Least is Punjab. But the intensity of poverty, you will find people in Punjab, in Lahore, extremely poor. You know, 20 persons to a room they live, with no toilet in the house. That's the kind of thing you will find there. So our view was, and of course it was also enlightened self-interest for Sindh. If we run down other provinces, and they don't have jobs there, they will all come to Karachi. And we have a demographic turbulence already going on, it will get worse. So our view was that Sindh should not try and damage other provinces. It's just that we should have a balance. And I think this approach worked. Initially there was resistance, but then the finance minister and the finance secretary agreed. He said, yes, this is a good approach, we'll do the horizontal first and then. And Punjab also agreed because it wasn't really losing anything. It was to be compensated for this, was agreed to before. And the federal government had made that commitment. The president has made that commitment, and whatever the center has to give, it will give for NFC to be drawn. Without that commitment, we couldn't have done it. If the center had said, "Nahi, hum compensate nahi karenge," then there would be no agreement. So I think that the role of the federal government, the president in particular, I think is critical in pushing through and adopting the 18th Amendment and NFC. I think the Federation has gained enormously out of it. One tax was completely dissolved, GST on services. It's now a provincial tax. It used to be in the Federation before. And Balochistan's share went up from 5% to 9% in the divisible pool. The 8th Amendment, 8th NFC is now being constituted. I have been nominated from Balochistan, which is ironic for me because last time I defended Sindh, now I'm in Balochistan. But the thing is that I don't see, between Sindh and Balochistan there was no conflict anyway. So I don't see any conflict now. But I think at this 8th NFC, probably there will be no conflict between any of the provinces. The way I foresee it, I think it is going to be the center versus the provinces. Because the center now wants to reverse some of the money it gave away. It so happened that we had, the NFC had several subcommittee meetings, but the main NFC, there were 9 of us, 9 members. We met first twice in Islamabad, then it was Peshawar, Quetta, Karachi. Last meeting was in Lahore. And the agreement took place in Lahore. And we were sitting there, although the Chief Minister and Ishaq Dar were not supposed to be there as part of the NFC, but they were there. Because they were the decision makers, so finally جو بھی concession Punjab کو کرنی تھی انہوں نے کرنی تھی, تو جو the representatives on their representatives on the committee did not have either the political clout or the authority to finally take those decisions. And the press had been called at 6 o'clock, and it was 11:30 at night. No agreement had yet been made, and we were sitting on the floor. Shaukat Tareem was finance minister, there was Shahbaz Sharif, and Ishaq Dar on the other side. I was sitting there. And I had made, I was the person who did all the calculations over there, because وہ کچھ economist ہونے کا فائدہ تھا. So we had calculated that out of the change from single 2 criteria to 4-point criteria, Punjab, whatever Punjab had lost, they would make up if the share of the provinces go up from 45% to 52%. Then Punjab would break even. Punjab wouldn't lose anything. So I said, 52 ہے, آپ 55 کر دیں اس کو. But Shahbaz Sharif insisted on 60%. So finally it was settled at 57.5. I'm going to be amused now because Ishaq Dar is finance minister and he is going to try to get some money out of the provinces back to the center. So let's see how that works. But I think this is going to be in my view, this is going to be the main battleground for the 8th NFC. I think there are some pending issues in federalism that we still have to deal with post 18th Amendment. And I want to go to the rise of MQM and the militancy in Karachi. As I started right at the beginning, the Muhajirs had a monopoly of political and economic and commercial and business power in Pakistan, which they gradually lost. And I have a small paper which I wrote when I was in STPI, which is still there. It's called The Anatomy of Ethnic Militancy, where I have shown how progressively MQM lost. Even the presidents of chambers and presidents of APTMA and all the bank presidents were 100% Muhajirs in the 50s and 0 in the 90s. So they feel a loss of power. So the Muhajir insurgency, if you can call it insurgency, is not one of, like Bangladesh, they felt deprived, they felt they were not treated well, but it is a revolt of the rich. They felt their privileges erode away. And so that is the thing happening there. Then there are provincial, every province has minorities, sections, large minorities. Punjab has its Saraitis, Karachi has Sindh has Muhajirs, Pakhtunkhwa has Hazara, and Balochistan has a split between Pakhtun and Baloch population, and there is rivalry, if not conflict. In Sindh there is active conflict, elsewhere there is rivalry. If you go to Ahmedabad and you ask somebody, are you Pathan? Very indirectly he will say, I'm not a Pathan, I'm Azhar. So that exists. And somewhere along the line, this fault line can erupt. And I think it's important for us to try and resolve it before it erupts. We have a tendency to let things lie and only deal with it, wo bhi patchwork lagate hain when a crisis arises. I think this is something that we somehow could deal with. 3 possible options. One, we can have more provinces. Although how the Muhajirs will get a province is a question mark. They are making this noise now, but again the territory becomes an issue. Even in Karachi, they are 40% of the population. So if Karachi is a separate province, the Muhajirs will not be in the majority. So that problem remains. Elsewhere it is easier because it's a well-defined territory in which these minority groups live. The other is you have very effective local governments. I think that evolves power to local levels, and I think nobody is interested कि जी वो मैं सराइती हूँ लाहौर में चीफ मिनिस्टर है लेकिन सारा काम तो मेरा मुल्तान में हो जाता है तो मुझे क्या जरूरत है along with learning. Another possible way was to have provincial senates, where these different groups within the provinces can be represented beyond their percentages. In the assembly, there are only percentages, but if you can have senates, maybe you can. So I think there is a need to, we can think about some ways of trying avoiding. I work in Balochistan, and there is a very strong rivalry between Pakhtun Baloch population, and I think there is it impedes development. I've seen this happen in Karachi. Karachi is becoming a wreck of a city because it has no political ownership. The chief minister is always from Sindh, and all the Sindhi politicians, there's no real interest in making Karachi something very nice to live in. Similarly, in Balochistan, I find that Quetta is a Pakhtun city, and the Baloch leadership probably will not put that much political effort into making Quetta a very nice place to live. Although we have seen that Mahajers have been in control of Karachi and all of Sindh has become nothing to Karachi. So, in fact, Karachi deteriorated continuously. All they did was give big contracts for high flyovers and underpasses, but that was because their contracts were big, not because they wanted to improve the city. And in fact, in many cases, these flyovers and underpasses have worsened the traffic, because no studies were done, no traffic studies were done to build it. They were more interested in giving contracts. So I end here, and I have questions and comments from all of you.
Economy मेरा subject नहीं है, but the way you have presented it seems very interesting. Rumors, etc. ये सारी की सारी जो आपकी बातें हैं उसके साथ बहुत attached है. Is there any reality that there are going to come new NFC awards, and there will be more amendments like 17th and 18th amendments?
With time, situation changes, and when the situation changes, your institutional framework needs to change. You can't.
Regarding 18th amendment, there are efforts being done for its reversal. That
Oh, yes,
was
that is-
mentioned by yourself.
But there are efforts being done to expand it also. And I think politics is a game of khichatani hoti hai na. Somebody will get their way and some don't. And in a democracy, the beauty of democracy is that everybody gets everything, a little bit. Everybody is unsatisfied because they didn't get everything, but everything gets somebody. So, kaam chलता रहता है. That's the beauty of democracy.
This department here, and it was really wonderful to hear you. And I have been reading your articles in Dawn and other newspapers, so it's really good to listen to you here directly. I have a few questions, quite a few, but I would like to limit them to 2 or 3 minutes now. First of all, I would like to ask you, as you mentioned the history and the past and everything, you said that 18th Amendment has demolished, centralization. I would like to know more about that, because if we look at the 18th Amendment, then only that, concurrent list is removed. And in the past, if we look at, still federal list is more than 67 something subjects there. So, it's still huge. So how can you say, are there any other things? Because Senate, as you mentioned, in federalism, Senate is more powerful, but our Senate still is weak after 18th Amendment. Only some adjustment is done, but it's not really federal Senate as we say. Another thing that I would like to ask you about, you mentioned that 18th Amendment has transformed Sindhi nationalists and demolished them as well, as you said. On what grounds you connect these two things? I would like to know more about that. There was third one, but I think two are enough. Okay, thank you.
The Senate, yes, I think it doesn't have powers, but the thing is that if there are voices to reverse NFC, there are also 18th Amendment. There are also voices to empower the Senate further. There is a talk people who demand that the Senate must be elected directly, and the Senate must have the power to pass the budget as well. Once these two things happen, the Senate becomes very powerful. The concurrent list, I think the abolition of the concurrent list should not be underestimated. There are now subjects which the provinces can tell the centre, please don't interfere, this is not your mandate. The problem is not with the Constitution or the 18th Amendment. I think that is very clear. The problem is with the provinces. They haven't yet absorbed the change that has taken place. Even when I was in Sindh government, I had to tell the secretary, why are you going to Islamabad for this? Or this query has come, tell them you will not reply to this, because it is none of their business. Very recently in Balochistan, the 18th Amendment, as I mentioned, 172(3), made oil and gas joint subject. About 6-8 months back, the Federal Ministry of Natural Resources and Petroleum, they allocated 50 blocks to various companies for exploration. 21 were in Balochistan. Chief Minister found this out from a newspaper and he called us and he said, "Ye kaise ho sakta hai?" Nobody asked us. So, formed a small committee comprising the Finance Secretary, Law Secretary, Secretary IPC, which is the Interprovincial Coordination, and myself. And we held a meeting and we tried to see what happened. And we found that the Federal Ministry had acted within the law. Because while the Constitution had been amended, none of the laws had been changed. The Mines Act of 1948 was what it was. The Ordinance of 1961 was what it was. The petroleum policy was exactly what it was. It gave the DGPC, which is the Director General of Petroleum Concessions, which gives awards these blocks, was exactly the same. So, and now we are in a process, which is I'm conducting this, of making sure that all these laws change. And wherever it says the federal government, it also says federal government and provincial government. Wherever the assent has to be granted by the President, it should say President and Governor. So it is up to the provinces to now consolidate 18th Amendment and make use of it. This is it. And I must admit very frankly that if the provinces fail, those who are anti-18th Amendment, we told you so, hum to pehle hi kaha tha, so nahi kar sakte. So I think the responsibility on the provinces to perform and show that they are capable of shouldering this additional responsibility is there. I know all of them personally. We've sat together, talked and things like that. It was very amusing that Mumtaz Bhutto would join Muslim League Nawaz, and Liaquat Jatoi would join them, form an alliance with them. It was very clear that they had lost
And
space.
Jalal Shah would join NPM.
So they had lost space, and they couldn't. Because this seminar in Hyderabad, in which Rasul Bas walked out, is a very big seminar, huge. I think 300 to 400 people were there. Sindh mein bahut zyada participation. Sindh, there is a lot of participation. People come. So there was some discussion, he made a comment, there were few claps. Then I spoke, and I developed a pet phrase which I can only say in Urdu, I said, "Ji, matam ki siyasat chhode." So I said, if you want to train your guns on the Sindh government. Make sure they perform. You're firing in the wrong direction. Islamabad has no power anymore. It has no political power, it has no fiscal power. All of it is with you. Do it. And the applause was great. It completely drowned out Rasul Bas Kalejo, who is a great Sindhi leader, bada icon hai, apne aap ko bhi samajhta hai, log bhi samajhte hain. He's a very learned man. It will be surprising how well read he is about Islam, about history, European history, our own history. He's a very learned man. But his politics have always been a bit problematic, But he lost the base. There's no politics now. So I think that's where I base it. जी.
सर मेरा आपसे मैं काम करती हूँ. मेरा सवाल सुनिए, आपकी कन्वर्सेशन के दौरान आपने मेंशन किया कि लाहौर के लोग जो है सबसे पुअरेस्ट है. तो आप एक इकोनॉमिस्ट हैं, तो आपने ये भी कहा कि वो पॉपुलेशन के आई थिंक आपने उस हवाले से ये बात की थी. तो थर के मुतालिक आप क्या कहेंगे? आप लोगों का इकोनॉमिस्ट आपकी तो ये जिम्मेदारी होती है कि रिसोर्सेज जो हैं वो लोगों तक पहुंचें और वो एक सेहतमंद नजर आए. लाहौर के लोग तो माशाल्लाह अच्छे खासे हट्टे कट्टे होते हैं, उनको पुअरेस्ट कहना आप एज एन इकोनॉमिस्ट मुझे समझ नहीं आया.
नहीं, मैंने दो, एक होता है हाउ फार बिलो द पॉवर्टी लाइन, जो सेकंड वाला है उसको हम इंटेंसिटी ऑफ पॉवर्टी कहते हैं. द इंटेंसिटी ऑफ पॉवर्टी इन लाहौर, urban poverty is the highest. Thar is rural, so you can't compare Lahore with Thar. In urban poverty, Lahore had the highest intensity of poverty. People, there may be few people, but they are abject poverty, which you don't find in other cities. That is what I am saying.
जैसे दिल्ली में है कैसे?
Thar is a very different problem. It's a historical problem which no government has addressed. And when currently Sindh ministers say every year people die, so what's the big deal this time? I think it's a shameful statement they are making. Why is it that every year people are dying? What happens is that a 13-year-old girl gets married. She is malnourished anyway. She has a child who is malnourished. If the girl child survives, she'll also get married at age 13, 14. And look at the intergenerational deterioration of nutritional standards that is taking place. In media, my apologies to anybody from media here, but it is so amusing. जैसे जी खुराक की किल्लत की वजह से 6 दिन का बच्चा मर गया. 6 दिन का बच्चा चावल खाएगा, आटा खाएगा, रोटी खाएगा. So it is not, and why is it that only children are dying and no adults are dying of hunger? If there is no food, adults will also die. So it is not starvation. It is not. The third problem has been presented in completely wrong context in the media and everywhere else. Third problem is a problem of very chronic malnutrition, which you will find elsewhere in Sindh also. It's not just Sindh. In fact, there are Sindh's nutritional statistics in many ways is worse than Balochistan, if not the same. Sindh is so bad. So this is a different problem.
स्टूडेंट हूँ. डॉक्टर साहब, मेरे 3 सवाल हैं आपसे. एक तो ये कि जो फेडरेशन होती है वो फेडरेटिंग यूनिट से होती है, और आपने कहा कि पाकिस्तान की जो स्ट्रगल है बेसिकली वो फेडरलिज्म की स्ट्रगल है. तो जो स्ट्रगल थी पाकिस्तान की, वो जो जहाँ पाकिस्तान कॉन्स्टिट्यूट हुआ जियोग्राफिकली, वहाँ पे स्ट्रगल नहीं थी, स्ट्रगल किसी और जगह पे थी. और बहुत क्लियरली जो है वो उसके अंदर जो इस्लाम है या मजहब है वो प्रीडोमिनेंटली जो है एक स्लोगन के तौर पे सामने आया था. तो ये मतलब एक बात जो समझ ना आने वाली है कि पाकिस्तान की स्ट्रगल कैसे फेडरलिज्म की पॉलिटिक्स थी, और अगर फेडरलिज्म की पॉलिटिक्स थी तो जो फेडरेटिंग यूनिट्स उसके बनने थे मुस्तकबिल में, वहां पे क्यों नहीं हो रही थी, और जहां पे वो बना नहीं था वहां पे क्यों हो रही थी. नंबर 1. नंबर 2 ये कि आपने कहा कि जो अभी पाकिस्तान बनने के फौरन बाद अर्ली 50s में या फौरी तौर पे बाद में मुहाजिरों के पास पावर थी, और उसके बाद पावर शिफ्ट हुआ, वो पंजाबियों के पास आया. पहले मुहाजिर सेंट्रिस्ट थे, वो सारी की सारी पावर को सेंटर में रखना चाहते थे, फिर पंजाबी सेंटर में रखना चाहते थे, और फिर आपने कहा कि अभी भी जब 18th अमेंडमेंट हो गई है तो कुछ पावर्स हैं जो दोबारा सेंट्रलाइज करना चाहते हैं पावर्स को. अभी वो कौन है एथनिकली, वो कौन है जो सेंट्रलाइज प्रोविंशियल ग्रीवेंसेस जो हैं उनको एनएफसी अवार्ड के जरिए या उनको 18th अमेंडमेंट के जरिए तो बहुत हद तक आपने जिस तरह से अपने कन्वर्सेशन में या लेक्चर में कहा भी है, लेकिन जो इंट्रा प्रोविंशियल कन्फ्लिक्ट्स हैं वो उनको बने कि मेनली फॉल्ट लाइन्स के तौर पे देखना, और फिर उनको जो है ना सिर्फ ये कह देना कि ये कोई सेनेट बन जाए, मतलब है कि अगर कोई प्रोविंशियल सेनेट्स बन जाए वहां पे मसले हल हो जाएंगे. तो ये insufficient नहीं है, मतलब कि इंट्रा प्रोविंशियल कैंडिडेट जो है,
पहला जो आपका
प्रोविंसेस के अंदर जो डेफिनेशन है, जो मार्जिनलिटी है,
जी।
वो महज रीजनल नहीं है, वो महज जियोग्राफिकल शेप है। पंजाब की अगर आप मिसाल लेते हैं तो वहाँ पे ये नहीं कि आप कहें कि साउथ पंजाब जो है बैकवर्ड है। साउथ पंजाब के अंदर भी देखेंगे तो कौन एथनिकली मतलब रिच है और कौन एथनिकली पुअर है, ये बहुत क्लियरली आपको पता चल जाता है। तो फिर सेनेट ही लाहौर में बन जाएगा, तो क्या जो ग्रीवेंसेस हैं वो कैसे रिड्रेस होगी?
कि मैंने तो बाय द वे 2-3 चीजें जिक्र की ना। ये तो जब when we accept, first of all we have to accept that there is an intra-provincial problem. Once you accept, then you say okay, how to deal with it, and then you negotiation start होती है। तो कई चीजें हो सकती है, ये 3 चीजें मैंने बाय द वे कही है, इसके अलावा भी चीजें हो सकती है, कॉम्बिनेशन भी हो सकता है, ठीक है। तो मैं लेकिन सिर्फ मेरा पॉइंट ये है कि इंट्रा प्रोविंशियल फॉल्ट लाइन्स मौजूद हैं और वो किसी वक्त एनी वन ऑफ द फॉल्ट लाइन्स कैन अराउंड और some elements within the country, outside the country can exploit it. That's all I was saying. दूसरा सवाल आपका मैंने दे दिया जो आपकी फौज है।
पहला सवाल
जी, पहला सवाल जो है दोबारा कहें जरा।
दोबारा सवाल ये था कि आपने अपनी जब बात की शुरू की है तो आपने कहा कि पाकिस्तान की जो
जी वो था जब प्री इन द 40s लेट्स से कोई प्रोविंशियल स्ट्रगल तो थी नहीं किसी भी प्रोविंस की नहीं थी। ये स्ट्रगल तो बेसिकली एक मुस्लिम आइडेंटिटी के हवाले से चली थी और जो इसकी इंस्टीट्यूशनल शेप इमर्ज हो रहा था, फाइनली जो हुआ 3 जोन उसमें, वो यही था ना कि ये सूबे जो हैं वेस्ट में और ईस्ट में वो अलग जोन में होंगे और वो एक उनका ऑटोनोमस स्टेटस होगा रिलेटिव टू दिल्ली विच वुड बी द फेडरल कैपिटल। तो ये जो नेगोशिएशंस हो रही थी वो इसलिए तो नहीं हो रही थी कि जी हमें ऑटोनॉमी चाहिए नमाजें पढ़ने के लिए। इट वॉज अ मुस्लिम आइडेंटिटी, स्ट्रगल फॉर मुस्लिम आइडेंटिटी। आई डोंट थिंक द पाकिस्तान मूवमेंट वॉज एवर अ स्ट्रगल फॉर इस्लाम। किसी ने किसी को नमाजें पढ़ने से नहीं रोका था, किसी को मस्जिद जाने से नहीं रोका था, ठीक है। ये तो मुस्लिम आइडेंटिटी, जब भी आप जैसे बंगाल में सेपरेटिस्ट मूवमेंट चला, उनका कॉमन डिनोमिनेटर क्या था? लैंग्वेज। इंडिया वॉज मल्टीलिंगुअल, मल्टी एथनिक। तो अगर एक आपको मूवमेंट चलानी थी तो आप एक कॉमन आइडेंटिटी ढूंढते हैं, वो आइडेंटिटी रिलीजन मिली यहां पर। सो दैट्स व्हाट इट वाज। एंड व्हेन फाइनली जो 46 का था वो यही था ना कि 3 जोन्स होंगे, वो जोन्स ऑटोनमस होंगे अपने में।
इसमें सॉरी मुझे जिस चीज इसमें समझ नहीं आ रही, उसमें समझ ये नहीं आ रहा कि जब हम फेडरेशन कहते हैं तो बाय डिफॉल्ट इसके अंदर प्लूरलिटी या डाइवर्सिटी आती है। जब पाकिस्तान की मूवमेंट मुस्लिम आइडेंटिटी की बुनियाद पे थी तो ये कैसे फेडरेशन की पॉलिटिक्स मुझे अभी तक
मुस्लिम आइडेंटिटी का उस वक्त कहीं भी ये नहीं कहा गया था कि सिंध सूबा नहीं होगा, सिंध तो सूबा था। और ये सही है कि जुलूसे ज्यादा निकले हैं दिल्ली और लखनऊ में क्योंकि वो सेंटर ऑफ पावर था, लेकिन सिंध असेंबली ने यूनानिमस रेजोल्यूशन पास किया था पाकिस्तान ज्वाइन करने का। पख्तूनख्वा में रेफरेंडम हुआ था, देयर दे वोटेड फॉर पाकिस्तान। So you can't say that the struggle for Pakistan, the people of Pakhtunkhwa or Sindh or Bengal were disinterested in Pakistan. That cannot hold, because there is evidence that Sindh Assembly passed this resolution and in fact, the secretaries on it. Sylhet there was a referendum, Pakhtunkhwa there was a referendum. You can say these referendums were not representative, but that's, you can say any election was not representative, you know, so that doesn't hold anywhere.
सर फिर तो हम ये कहेंगे कि सिर्फ पंजाब में पाकिस्तान होता है, बाकी तो सब सेपरेट होना है।
लेकिन मतलब अगर एक वो अग्रीमेंट उस वक्त न होती है एक मुल्क बनाने का, तो जाहिर है सब अलग अलग मुल्क बन जाते हैं या बिल्कुल न बनते, कुछ भी न बनते। लेकिन ये तो आप नहीं कह सकते हैं कि पंजाब और पख्तूनख्वा और सिंध और बंगाल जो है उनको कोई दिलचस्पी नहीं थी पाकिस्तान की, सिर्फ यूपी के मुसलमानों को दिलचस्पी थी पाकिस्तान में। ये तो बिल्कुल गलत स्टेटमेंट है।
औरंगजेब दिमाली मेरा नाम है सर, MSIR का स्टूडेंट हूँ इस्लामिक यूनिवर्सिटी से। आपसे क्वेश्चन है, क्योंकि आप इस वक्त CM बलूचिस्तान के साथ काम कर रहे हैं 1 साल से, बलूचिस्तान के हवाले से मेरा क्वेश्चन है। प्रिसाइसली 172 आर्टिकल इक्वल एंड ज्वाइंट ऑनरशिप की बात करता है, तो क्या ये एक सेल्फ कंट्राडिक्ट नहीं कर रही है? यहाँ के एक तरफ तो आप कह रहे हैं कि ये डेवोल्यूशन ऑफ पावर है, दूसरी तरफ वो ज्वाइंट भी है, तो ये कैसी पावर है? और दूसरी बात कि हमने अब तक कोई इम्प्रूवमेंट नहीं देखी, जैसे कि आपके एक टीम मेंबर से मेरी बात हुई है, नाम मैं बता नहीं सकता, लेकिन उन्होंने बात की है कि जी बलूचिस्तान रेवेन्यू अथॉरिटी या ग्रीन बेल्ट के हवाले से या डेट प्रोसेसिंग के लिए तुर्बत और हरनाई वुलन बेल्ट के हवाले से हमने बात की हुई है, पॉलिसीज बनाई हुई, अब तक हमें कोई इम्प्रूवमेंट नजर नहीं आई। तो ये दोनों क्वेश्चन।
First is your whether this is a contradiction. No, it is not a contradiction. In any federation, there are several subjects which are jointly handled in any federation. So this is one of them. The demand for Balochistan, from Balochistan, Dr. Malik was a member of the Constitution Commission, was to make it a provincial subject, and it was a compromise. In politics, you make compromises. You can't always have your way in everything. So this was a compromise. Now the problem is to interpret it. Of course, the federal government, people in Islamabad would like to interpret it very narrowly. People in Quetta would want to interpret it very broadly. And it's a process that is, we'll see how it goes. Those of you who are students of law or constitution or political science would know that all constitutions, even the American Constitution, there is a constitution, there are clauses, but there are also judicial judgments on interpretation, which effectively become part of the constitution. You know, so how it is interpreted and how it is implemented will play out. It's just 4 years since this has happened, and these things take time. The improvements, things don't happen overnight. You mentioned a few things, Harnai woolen mills. I'll just elaborate on that. The mills were set up in 1954, and it was a great contribution to that area because the whole northeast, which is Zog, Lorelai, Musakhel, Harnai, Kila Saifullah, this is called sheep country. If you drive over there, you will frequently have to stop your car because flocks of sheep are crossing the road from one end to the other. It's sheep country. 700 employees there. Harnai was a booming town. Till 1977, it was profitable. It was running profitably. The first time it went into a loss was 1978. In 1982, it shut down. Somewhere in the 90s, they sold it. But only the factory was sold. The land was not sold. This factory belonged to PIDC, Pakistan Industrial Development Corporation. Land continued to belong to PIDC. The factory was sold. Lahore party bought the factory with the intention, he wasn't interested in the land because he intended to move the machinery to Lahore and set up the factory. But when he arrived with the trucks to move the machinery, the whole town of Harnai stood up and said, "Ye hum to nahi le jane denge isko. Ye hamara karkhana hai." So he failed. Made 2-3 attempts, he failed. Then he sold the place to another party, without telling that second party that ye Harnai wale le nahi jane dete. So when the second party came to move the machinery, again the people of Harnai stood there and said, "Ye hum to nahi le jane denge aapko." So now it stands as it is. I visited Harnai, and I don't know how many of you have read Charles Dickens' novels, but in one of his novels there is a character called Miss Havisham. she's supposed to get married, she's dressed in the white marriage dress, the cake is there and everything, and the groom runs away. And for 20 years, she just sits there waiting for it. So it's like Miss Havisham's house, that place. Just दिन वो बंद हुआ, everything is as it is, no change. You walk there and you feel as if suddenly you will have workers all over the place, the machines will be working and everything. Of course, the machinery is rusted. Now the problem with Harnai is that government of Balochistan wants to talk to the first party says that I have nothing to do with this, I don't want to talk to you. The government of Balochistan legally cannot talk to the second party because on paper the second party doesn't exist. The land belongs to PIDC, which has been disbanded. So who does the land belong to now? So these are legal complications we are trying to work through out. Once the legal issues are resolved, then of course the factory will have to be pulled down. The building has rusted, the roof has fallen in some places, the machinery will have to be scrapped, and a new factory will have to be built. But the political decision has been taken to rebuild the factory at that very spot. We've gone through the place. It is 44 acres of land which they have. Now, there is a certain law which says that if it is 50 acres, then it can acquire some special incentives. It becomes eligible for some incentives. So we've already identified 6 additional acres of land around it, which we will add to this, and then it becomes economic zone, special economic zone बन जाएगा वो. उसको कुछ मज़ीद बरात मिल सकती है. That will have to be done, but the legal thing has to be sorted out. So my point is that these things take time. Just because you float an idea doesn't mean within a year it happens.
सर एक इम्प्लीमेंट किया है बलूचिस्तान का नसीराबाद, जाफराबाद, जन्नत पिछले 5-6 साल से बड़ा डिस्टर्ब है. उसके हवाले से आपकी क्या पॉलिसी है? एक बड़ी कंट्रीब्यूशन करता है बलूचिस्तान की इकोनॉमी में.
It is a very rich area, contributes a lot, and the problem of that area is that it's highly feudal. Its real problem is that it's highly feudal. It's extremely rich, but the benefits of that wealth does not go beyond half a dozen families.
सर मैं फ्लड से डिस्टर्ब होने की बात कर रहा हूँ.
जी.
पिछले 5-6 साल से उसके हवाले से आपकी पॉलिसी जो सॉल्यूशन है.
There are plans to create protective bunds and protect flood, and Balochistan alone cannot do it. They have to do it in conjunction with Sindh, because the water that comes into that area comes from Sindh. So it has to be a joint effort and joint investment for that to happen. Yeah, but we were aware of it, and the engineers, the irrigation engineers have ever designed structures that will protect that area from floods.
Two questions. One is you talked about the change from a single to a 4-point criteria, and I think for the benefit of some of the students maybe in the audience, if you could sort of elaborate on that, because if I understand it correctly, you meant from population criteria to a wider criteria including population density and poverty, which was I think a very radical change, because, and not many people understand it. It was, I raised this issue because we had a meeting of the Senate Standing Committee on Education at Quaid-e-Azam University 2 months ago, and the chairman Senate talked about increasing the quota for Balochi students. And when it was elaborated that the quota is fixed on the basis of population, so only it will have to go back to the parliament for a decision. I quoted this change from the single to the 4-point criteria as far as the NFC was concerned, and there is a time I think now to rethink the population quota in educational institutions and in employment also, because if it can change over there, it doesn't need to be static over there. That is question 1. Question 2 is about the utilization of the NFC allocations. I mean, when the time for the 8th NFC award comes, wouldn't this issue arise as to how the provinces were not even able to because of their institutional and human resource constraints, able to utilize the additional amount that they got. And I think Sindh and Balochistan and KPK, I think, also would come under scrutiny for this. I mean, I don't think that that is a good enough reason for denying them the same or even maybe more of an allocation, but this is an issue.
Let me answer your December 2009. In January, I was appointed advisor for planning and development in Singapore, and I was advisor for 18 months, and I was then I am in Balochistan now. In fact, during the NFC, because 5 months we were all very close together, we lived in the same hotel. So even the Chief Minister Raisani and the Finance Secretary from Balochistan and all that. So I used to tell them, look here, your money is going to double. You know, from 26 billion it went up to 83 billion. I can help you put together a development plan which will, change Balochistan's face. They didn't do that. They took the entire money, divided it equally among all the MPs and forgot about it. Sindh, not very different. This kind. And this point will come up and should also come up.
Sure.
But I see it this way. You remember there was a shooting incident in Lahore where one American CIA operative shot 2 boys, Eamon Davis, and there was a Islamic solution to the problem. Money. What happened to that family? They fought and killed each other. They were murdered in that family. When you dump that kind of money on someone who has never seen that kind of money, don't expect them to spend it rationally. Provinces simply didn't know what to do with this money. It was like manna from heaven. Suddenly you have a lot of money. Sindh got to collect GST services. I set up the whole unit, designed it, automated it. We were getting 15 billion from Islamabad, from FBR on this head. In the first year we collected 27 billion. And 35, and 42. It kept going. Sindh had so much money. Similarly, Balochistan has so much money. They have never seen so much money because they didn't know what to do. Look at the provincial P&D departments. They have no capacity. It's a post office. Today, someone is Secretary Social Welfare, Social Secretary Sports. Tomorrow he becomes Secretary P&D, and he is supposed to deal with. I was advisor P&D. The budget that I had was 160 billion rupees in 2010-2011. Now from hand over 160 billion rupees to a secretary whose capacity is to run the social welfare department, what do you expect? So I think one has to be a little magnanimous here. Allow time. All provinces will have to have a planning commission, professionally staffed. Not the run-of-the-mill bureaucrats. Either they transfer kar diya, udhar laga diya usko. They have to be professional staff with, in Sindh P&D department, there were 90 employees in the department. Only 15 could use calculators. The rest didn't know how to use a calculator. Now, you dump all this money, 200 billion rupees with these people, what do you expect? So I think one has to be a little magnanimous. The provinces have been, if I'm only using my right arm and not using my left arm at all, after a year this arm will atrophy. It will not be able to work. Provincial administrations have atrophied. For 65 years they had nothing to do. Everything came from Islamabad. So it takes time for things to develop and move on. I think so this is something you will just have to be magnanimous.
Sir, my
criteria.
Sorry, सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट तो भूल गया, ये थोड़ा लंबा जवाब है. Population criteria था कि पंजाब was 7%, Sindh was 23%, Pakhtunkhwa was 13%, and Balochistan was 5%. And that's how money was distributed. And it was agreed that okay, we will go for multiple criteria, and 4 criteria have been adopted. Now, NFC was a a remarkable experiment in combining economic analysis with politics. This was a phase of political economy. How it was done. We said, okay, we'll allow one province to suggest one criteria. It was a political decision, no objective rationale for that. So Sindh said revenue should be a criteria. Okay, revenue will be a criteria. Balochistan said area should be a criteria. Area was the criteria. Pakhtunkhwa didn't really have anything solid to say. Poverty should be a criteria. Everybody agreed because everybody has a stake in that poverty. Okay. Once that was decided, now how are you going to operationalize it? Revenue, the issue was because Karachi port is in Sindh, all the customs duty is collected in Karachi. But are you going to say that this belongs to Sindh? Because if you have a factory in Lahore and you imported raw materials, paid your customs duty in Karachi and the goods is processed in Lahore, then that customs duty belongs to Punjab, not to Karachi. So the issue arose, do we take revenue collection or do we take revenue generation? Because the revenue that is collected in Karachi is not all generated by Karachi, some of it is much of it is generated. My own calculation had told me that 40% is generated in Karachi and the rest 60% in the rest of the country, mostly Punjab. Now, but my calculation was not official calculation, so it wouldn't be acceptable to everybody. It's just my word for it. And giving 40% away to Sindh would not be acceptable to others without an objective official number that was there. So we had some discussion and then we decided that okay, we'll do 50-50. 50% on collection and 50% on generation. Now what is the, how do you, collection तो बड़ा clear है कि हमें पता है कितना पैसा collect होता है Karachi port पे. What do we do about generation? How do we, what is the measure for generation? So we said okay, we take electricity consumption as a measure for generation. Because the largest component of electricity consumption is in Punjab. So that settles it. So that was, that part was settled. Then area was very easy. Because area is, everybody knows what is the area. So that was very easy. And for area we did inverse population density. We took population density, which is, and inverted it, reversed it. So 0.5 became 0.85. So if population density in Balochistan is very low, so say 5 persons per square mile, but when you make it 1/5, it becomes 20%. So that Balochistan got that heavy weightage on population. Poverty again was difficult. There were several studies. SPDC had done a report on poverty. They had identified provincial population below the poverty line, even by the district level and all that. UNDP had also produced a report which there, and Federal Bureau of Statistics has also produced a report. All these gave different rankings. Sindh favored SPDC report because it favored them. Pakhtunkhwa, it was NWSP then, favored the UNDP report because this showed them to be a, ironically, the Federal Bureau of Statistics report showed Punjab to be the poorest, so Punjab favored that report. We took an average of all three. So that's how it was resolved. Now, the thing that comes out here is that there was a political will on the part of all 4 provinces and the center to come to a settlement.
पंजाब में population ही रखा है.
Population तो है, down from 100%. 3.7% is the weight for area, and the fact that it is 3.7 can tell you how much bargaining took place. You know, बिल्कुल दुकानदारी थी. ये 5 पैसे कम कर दो, नहीं 6 पैसे ज़्यादा कर दो. बिल्कुल वैसे ही हो रहा था. Sort of. But I tell you, in 5 months of negotiations, not once there was bitterness. Not once we shouted at each other. नॉट वंस ये एक दफा नहीं हुआ कोई हमने आंखें निकाली हो एक दूसरे पे या इल्जामात लगाए हो. इट वॉज सो कॉर्डियल एंड आई थिंक दैट गिव्स मी फेथ इन दिस कंट्री. If you allow people to settle things themselves, we will do it. Sorry.
Okay. Peace.
I have a very small comment that what if a few provinces are able to perform under the 18th Amendment and a few are unable to perform? How will we go ahead with that?
It's always like that. Take Canada, for example. Some provinces are doing very well, some provinces are not doing well at all. Take India, for example. Gujarat is doing extremely well. Bihar is down. In fact, whenever I go to India, I have some of these friends, NGOs and others. So, the usual joke there is that Kashmir ek shart pe denge, Bihar bhi le lo. Because they are so sick of Bihar.
Not necessarily economically, but capacity-wise.
So, capacity has to be built up.
Yeah.
In Canada, they have a whole program which is called fiscal equalization, which means that if there is a province where education levels are lower, they get more money for that. They have built a whole system of fiscal equalization to bring all the provinces at par with each other. So that will happen, and we'll have to do that.
Interprovincial coordination will actually...
Interprovincial coordination, and I think what Dr. Alia just mentioned, that if admission quotas are on population basis, you change it to give advantage to the more backward provinces. These things will need to be done. In Latin America and in Spain and in Philippines, where this kind of devolution has taken place, it took them 10 to 15 years to finally get things on the ground. So I think let us not be impatient. Let us not want immediate results. Things are happening gradually with time. Amjad.
Sir, thank you very much. It is very interactive and enlightening conversation. I would just like to seek your perspective on basically the growing trend of decentralization in Pakistan against the context of 18th Constitutional Amendment. I would like your perspective on how do you see the broader political economy of this decentralization? For instance, as we see that NFC is not agreeable by international establishment, revenue generation formula, revenue distribution formula is not agreeable by the local establishment as well. And then there is a kind of political perspective on that. And there is a growing trend, sir, which we are seeing, that perhaps this time it's a, I would say, transnational conspiracy of reversing NFC and 18th Amendment. So I would like, one, to have your perspective on the political economy of this decentralization. My second point is, basically, when we are talking about the provincial capacity, since you are leading strategic thinking for a province, what are you learning from Balochistan which can be shared with other provinces? For instance, with the existing contentious establishment of this, again, planning commission at federal level, which has produced 2025. So, planning commission has produced 2025 actually largely on 90% of devolved subjects. Why provinces allowed, and why chief ministers and the political leadership could not understand the sensitivity, and I am unable to see any formal communication from any province to the federation on this question that you cannot manage my household, let me manage my household. So despite 18th Amendment, despite 7th NFC, why provinces are allowing federation to manage their household?
The first question, decentralization. Every element wants to maximize gains for itself. The federal powers were not happy with 18th Amendment, they will try to reverse it. But this is to be expected. You can't say they are evil people. This is what politics is all about. Politics is you maximize your gains for your constituency. So they are trying to maximize gains for their constituency, and if they lost the battle on the 18th Amendment, and I asked Raza Rabbani, ये हुआ कैसे? Why was it allowed? And his answer was that everybody probably thought this will never happen. And suddenly they woke up and said it has happened. You know, they said ये सियासतदान लड़ते रहेंगे, ये क्या कर सकते हैं, इनको आता क्या है, and they did it. So I think it's up to the provinces to defend themselves from the decentralization. As far as international agencies are concerned, I have being an economist, we interact a bit. I think they have now accepted this. Acceptance is right. I know for a fact that for the first 2 years after the 18th Vendor and NFC, there were very concrete efforts by them to somehow reverse at least the NFC part. So, I had a rough discussion with the IMF, head of the IMF mission here 2 years ago. He insisted that the provinces must create a surplus budget. Because if the federation has a deficit budget and the provinces have a surplus budget, so it will average out and the budget deficit will be lower, which was the IMF requirement. So I told them that my word to him was that, look here, because you can't have 3 square meals a day, you are asking me to skip a meal. If the federal government has a deficit, why should the provinces create the surplus? Let the provincial government cut its expenditures. That was my argument. They didn't like it, they sort of opposed. And when you are meeting at that level, there is only so much you can say, and you have to be a bit polite, even though you don't wish to be polite with them. So that I think there is now broad acceptance. There is still going to be an effort, and as I said, the effort, probably the 8th NFC, the Federation would try to get some things back. But we'll see how it goes. Your second question, I think, as I said, everybody is still learning. Just as in the case of the allocation of blocks for exploration, this additional Secretary Mines Department who went to Islamabad, signed the agreement and came back, and the Chief Minister really took him to task. But he was following what is in the rules. He wasn't really, and very recently, Balochistan has signed on to National Curriculum Commission or something like that. That was signed by the Education Minister. And the Chief Minister was very upset. He said, "Ye aapne kya kar diya?" And he said that I didn't realize what I was doing. So as I said at the beginning also, that it takes time for these things to get into people's mindset. For 65 years, you've always done what Islamabad told you to do. And we are conscious, we fight for certain things, we look at every line in the constitution. So, but everybody is not like that. There are people who run their daily lives and come in the morning, open their files, and what do bureaucrats do? Gee, please comment, please advise. Oh, आगे कर देते file. Please discuss. They just आगे कर देते. So, it takes time for things to percolate down. I think this will happen. The challenge will come. Capacity नहीं है challenge कैसे करें? In Balochistan has one problem. PMLN is a coalition partner. Dr. Malik can't challenge the Islamabad government too much because there is a coalition partner here. वो coalition partner निकल जाएगा तो government गिर जाएगी. So there are these constraints you have to work your way through. But I think this is the ink on the 18th Amendment and NFC has not even dried yet. We should not expect too much. I think these things will happen, and we learn from these things. We learn from them.
Just coming to the bigger problem which affects the entire country, energy. We recently saw the SARC summit sign a deal on electricity sharing across the region. But according to our understanding of it in the media as well as the academic community, having a successful power corridor between South Asian countries would entail linking of the grid between India and Pakistan. As you've said, the lack of political will makes that a pipe dream still. How do we get around that? Because power is a basic concern for all of us. and this entire project seems a lot cheaper than the RTPs we currently buy.
If we can produce power out of thermal, we can meet 80% of Pakistan's needs and as well as export power to India. The grid will only work if one country has a surplus over the other. And I think Pakistan has the capacity to create surplus power if we shift to coal. This is not the subject, but if we shift to coal, we will save millions of dollars on furnace oil import. Our balance of payments will be stronger as a result. We don't have to run to IMF and the Americans and the Saudis and the Chinese every time to bail us out from our balance of payments problems. So this is a different topic. I have written on it, how we need to stabilize our balance of payments, and power is one of them. We can actually, instead of spending money on dollars on importing furnace oil, we can earn dollars by exporting electricity to India. So this is a good thing that has happened, and I think we need to build on it.
So also don't you think it's a little regressive to move back to coal? Don't you think it's a little regressive to move back to coal in this day and age?
What is regressive? It's a fuel. All you have to do is make sure that it's properly cleaned. It will maybe raise the cost of electricity a bit, but there is no alternative. For Pakistan, there is no alternative to coal. Because we have reached the limits of hydel power. There is nothing more we can get out of it. In any case, all hydel stations don't function 4 months in a year because there is no water in winter. So you have to rely on furnace oil anyway. So instead of relying on imported furnace oil, we should rely on our own coal. Gee, I'm told to close the session, but we'll take the last question first.
Stop the army from taking over, or at least discourages them. But do you really think that is true? Because do they really need to take over now, or they can manipulate through other means? Is it possible? And last but not least, how can we achieve curriculum independence? We still have an HEC that is sending out memos, universities, teaching national ideology. Do we get, but our national ideology is not something that everyone agrees with. Our provinces have different heroes compared to the federation. Can we teach about them in the provinces?
I think if the army decides to take over, they'll take over. If someone has a gun, there's nothing you can do. You know, we faced all of this in Karachi streets. I have faced this 4 times. So you take it away. You know, what can you do? But you know, it's going to be difficult for them to manage. And as time goes on, it is going to become more and more difficult, because today the provinces are not fully aware of what their powers are. Over time, they are going to become more and more aware, and then they will resist the dictation from Rawalpindi. And of course, it all depends on how well the politicians and the provinces manage. As I said, if the provinces don't manage well, then those who are anti-18th Amendment will say, if we told you so, these people don't have the capacity to do it anyway. The capacity issue was also raised in NFC. When we were arguing for devolution of GST services, FBR came with a whole presentation on capacity. And I had one sentence for them. I said, for an organization that has managed to drop the tax GDP ratio, is accusing us of not having capacity. But what did Sindh do? Sindh set up the Sindh Revenue Board, and every other province was watching for Sindh to fail, so that GST services goes back to FBR. But Sindh succeeded. It succeeded so well that Punjab has created a revenue board, Pakhtunkhwa has created a revenue board, and Balochistan is thinking about it, although the revenue base is so small that probably the salaries of the board will be more than the taxes we collect. So I think we are not yet sure whether. I personally think we shouldn't set it up. But success meant that it remains with the provinces, and even the IMF then accepted, okay, it remains with the provinces. But if we fail, you can't. Similarly, politically, if the politicians mess up, the army will find the excuse to take over.
What about curriculum independence? Right now the HEC is telling that...
I think it's a battle that will have to be worked out, and some middle ground will have to be found. I think it will probably not acceptable to everybody or not even feasible to have completely independent curriculum, and at the same time it is no longer acceptable that there is going to be one curriculum dictated from Islamabad. That is not going to be accepted. It will not happen. So I think some middle ground will have to be worked out as we go along. We have a federal HEC now. The provinces are also creating their HEC. Both can exist.